Horror doesn't need to be complex to be effective. Some of the scariest moments in gaming don't come from hyper-realistic graphics or elaborate cutscenes, but from simplicity. Lethal Company proves this better than any game in recent years. No over-the-top gore, no bloated mechanics, just you, your crew, and the crushing silence of an abandoned facility where something is always watching. But how does Lethal Company create such an effective horror experience with so little? Today, we're going to be breaking down how this game uses minimalist horror to get under your skin and terrify the ever-living crap out of you. Lethal Company drops you into a bleak, dystopian universe where survival isn't just about escaping monsters, it's about making money, or at least keeping the company satisfied. You, the player, are sent to various moons to scavenge for seemingly random junk, collecting whatever you can find to meet a strict financial quota. But here's the catch, you never actually see this money. Instead, every credit you earn goes right back into buying your own survival. Fail to meet your quota, and the company doesn't just fire you. You're ejected from the autopilot ship into deep space, left to die in the freezing cold nothingness, millions of miles from anywhere useful.
As you have not met the profit quota, your performance has been deemed below standard. Welcome to our disciplinary process.
Your only safe haven in the game is the autopilot ship. It's the game's main hub, yet even here you're still vulnerable to some entities. Here you can use the onboard terminal to purchase supplies, research entities that you've already scanned, and choose which moon to travel to next. Once you navigate to a moon and land, you and your team have from sunrise to sundown to scavenge whatever loot you can find. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, not exactly. Because to find loot, you'll need to enter massive, procedurally generated industrial complexes, cold, decaying structures filled with man-made horrors beyond your comprehension. The entities of Lethal Company comprise the majority of the danger that the player will face while exploring. I'm not going to do an analysis of every entity in the game, as this video is more so to point out how Lethal Company's minimalistic horror works so well. However, Wendigoon made an incredible thorough analysis of the entire game, and I highly recommend watching it. I've linked it down in the description if you're interested. However, the entities in Lethal Company range from mutated insect monsters to walking lifelike nutcrackers to uninhabited suits of warmongering akin to Fallout's power armor. Most entities pose a risk to your life and have varying behaviors from following you in the shadows to extreme aggression that you're unlikely to survive. Entities can be found both inside the facility and outside, roaming on the surface of the moon. Speaking of moons, there are 11 total moons available on Lethal Company that you can travel to loot, varying in both difficulty and environmental features. These include 3 easy moons, Experimentation, Assurance, and Vow, 3 intermediate moons, Offense, March, and Adamance, and 5 hard moons, Rend, Dine, Titan, Artifice, and Embryon. All of these moons are available to the player from the terminal except for Artifice and Embryon, which will require the player to find clues to the moon on other moons. At that point, those 2 moons will be available to travel to from the terminal. Each moon will contain a designated facility interior, which is where the majority of the loot will be located. These facility interiors can either be the factory, which is going to be the default facility type, the mine shaft, and the manor. Each entity has a specific spawn chance depending on the moon or facility type, with higher difficulty moons containing higher spawn chances and maximum entities, but also having larger qualities and quantities of loot items. Each moon also has a maximum power cap for both indoor and outdoor. This means that there can only be a specific combination of entities' power levels on the moon at one time. So on an earlier moon like Experimentation, you won't have to face several highly dangerous entities at the same time, which may be the case on the higher difficulty moons. The system for moons and facilities fits the game perfectly, giving players the freedom to choose their approach, whether they want to play it safe or risk it for the biscuit for the greater rewards. I truly love that the game doesn't force a linear difficulty curve, but instead lets you decide how much danger you're willing to face in pursuit of your goal. However, as you survive longer and longer, your quota keeps increasing. The higher level moons are going to become a necessity to gather enough loot to stay in the game and avoid your untimely demise. That's how the game functions on the most basic level, and for the purposes of this video, it will be sufficient enough. But before we dive deeper into the game's lore, let's take a closer look at what makes the game so terrifying. One of Lethal Company's greatest strengths is its atmosphere. Unlike many horror games that rely on constant jump scares, Lethal Company thrives on ambience and anticipation. The visuals of Lethal Company embrace a pixelated, low-poly aesthetic, standing in contrast to the hyper-realistic games that dominate the modern horror market. This gives the game a unique, distinct look to it. However, I don't feel like it detracts from the experience, I feel like it actually enhances it. It gives the game sort of an uncanny vibe that sets it apart. Additionally, the entities are still just as scary as monsters in other titles. Outside of the unique graphics, the facilities in this game are dark. Really, really dark. A flashlight is going to be a necessity for your survival, and even then, there are still creatures that lurk on the ceilings, behind doorways, and in otherwise random spots that you wouldn't think to check. The audio design of Lethal Company is one of its most effective tools for building tension. It blends silence, environmental sounds, and subtle background music to create an atmosphere of constant unease. Unlike many horror games that rely on loud, dramatic scores to signal danger, Lethal Company keeps its music minimal and ambient, just enough to instill a lingering sense of dread without overpowering the moment. This restraint forces players to listen closely, to the distant clang of metal, the hum of flickering lights, or the eerie echo of footsteps that may or may not be their own. When inside the industrial facilities, the audio echoes in a lifelike way. This includes your footsteps, the footsteps of your crew, the voice chat of your crew, environmental sounds, and sounds from entities. The game's spatial audio design only heightens the terror, making it much more difficult to pinpoint exactly where a threat is coming from. Your means of self-defense in Lethal Company are scarce, reinforcing the overwhelming power the entities have over you. The only purchasable weapons are a shovel, a flashbang, and a zap gun, but they offer minimal protection, with the shovel being the only one capable of dealing lethal damage after several well-placed swings. Inside the facility, players can scavenge stop signs, yield signs, and makeshift flashbangs, but carrying a weapon takes up a valuable item slot, limiting how much loot you're able to bring back. While you are not completely defenseless, you're vastly outmatched compared to the horrors that are lurking around you. Even the one supposed safe haven, the autopilot ship, offers no guaranteed protection. Certain entities like the eyeless dogs, baboon hawks, and circuit bees can invade your refuge without warning, stripping away any illusion of security. This leaves you with a sobering realization. Even with the crew, you are far more vulnerable than you are capable. Your options? Stay unnoticed, maneuver past the threats and escape, stand your ground and fight however futile, or surrender to the inevitable, losing your life in the pursuit of profit. However, there are a few more powerful weapons, the double-barrel shotgun and the butcher's knife. The catch though, these can only be obtained by killing a nutcracker or a butcher entity, making them rare finds typically limited to the most dangerous moons. Even with these weapons in hand, combat should always be a last resort, reserved for life or death situations. The noise they create is just as much a threat as the entities themselves, likely to attract even more dangerous horrors lurking nearby. One of Lethal Company's greatest strengths is its storytelling. It doesn't spoon-feed you the narrative like a children's book. There's no exposition dump, no cutscenes laying everything out for you, but instead, the lore is something that you have to piece together yourself. The origins of the entities, their behavior, and the sinister nature of the company can only be uncovered by scanning creatures in-game and reading the bestiary entries aboard the autopilot ship. This kind of environmental storytelling is what makes games like the Soulsborne series so compelling. You have to dig deep to uncover the truth, and that journey makes every discovery feel earned. But the deeper you go, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Lethal Company isn't just a game about scavenging for scraps and avoiding monsters. It's a story about a corporation that sees human lives as disposable. Your existence in this world is purely transactional. If you or a crewmate die on the job, the company doesn't mourn your loss. It simply issues a financial penalty. The only way to reduce this penalty? Bring the body back to the ship. But why? What possible use does the company have for a dead body other than the clothes on its back? The more you play, the clearer everything becomes. You are not working for your own gain. Every penny you collect is funneled right back into the cycle, used to buy the tools that merely extend your survival, but never to break free from it. The quotas keep rising and the dangers keep escalating. There's no way out. The company never gives you the option to retire, to leave, or to escape. Your death is not a possibility, it's an inevitability. No matter how skilled you are, no matter how careful you play, the system is designed to make you fail. And the most horrifying part? The company knows this, and they are still sending countless workers to their deaths for what is, in the grand scheme of things, an insignificant profit. The money they make off of your suffering is almost laughable. just a drop in the bucket, but they don't care. They never did. You and your crewmates are nothing more than disposable assets, another batch of nameless workers ready to be thrown into the grinder. That realization, that is the true horror of Lethal Company. Cut content in games has always fascinated me, so this is a topic I plan to cover more in future videos on other games. Lethal Company has a handful of scrapped items, or cut content items, including binoculars, a box, and the mapper. The binoculars would have functioned as expected, though they likely wouldn't have been very useful given that most of the danger in the game occurs from within the facility's tight hallways. However, it could have had some use in the large sprawling outdoor areas, especially with some fog that covers up the area. The box remains to be a bit of a mystery, but according to the wiki, it was likely going to be intended as a mechanic used to hide from entities and evade their capture. And lastly, the mapper was an item that worked very similarly to the ship's monitors, so we can conclude that it was probably repurposed into the ship's monitors. The game also does have a handful of scrapped entities, including the Lasso Man, the Red Pill or Obunga, and the Kidnapper Fox. And yes, I cannot believe that I just said Obunga is a cut content entity from Lethal Company. The Lasso Man was a bizarre looking figure made of red ropes with hands resembling lassos, likely using them to grab the player and pull them into their death. The Red Pill, or Obunga, was essentially just an image file that followed the player, very similar to the Nextbots found in Gmod. It was likely used as a test entity that was meant to be given proper behaviors, models, and animations later on once they, fully realize what that would look like. The Kidnapper Fox was an outdoor entity that hid in bushes and ambushed the players when they weren't expecting it. It was briefly added in an update, but was removed shortly after due to being too overpowered. Lastly, there is one scrapped moon known as 44 Liquidation. Very little is known about it, as only a few game files reference it, and there was never a developed map that is associated with it. It's possible that this could be added in a future update as a new moon to explore, but for now, all that remains are the remnants that are hidden in the game files. Lethal Company proves that horror doesn't need complex mechanics, elaborate lore dumps, or excessive gore to be truly terrifying. Instead, it thrives on simplicity, a haunting atmosphere, unpredictable entities, and the constant dread of knowing that you are powerless. There's no hand-holding, no scripted jump scares to brace for, just the raw, unsettling fear that comes from what you don't see, what you don't know, and what you can't control. This is why Lethal Company is a perfect example of minimalist horror done right. But I want to know your thoughts on Lethal Company down in the comments. If you enjoyed this analysis of Lethal Company, please be sure to subscribe, drop a like on the video, and stick around for more deep dives on horror games. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Peace!